Okay, hello Cloud Gurus and welcome to this lecture. This is one of the last lectures in the VPC section of the course. Congratulations for getting this far. I'm sure you've learnt an awful lot about VPCs. One of the things you will see in the exam is going to be different scenario questions, and it will all be about cost optimization for your VPC architecture. So you still need to know at a high level how AWS network costs work. So I'm going to go through an example network cost diagram. I'm just going to use pretend figures just to keep the network simple, but you should be able to follow along. So let's say we've got our user and they want to connect into a VPC. So every time they speak to let's say it's a web server inside our VPC, the traffic coming in is going to be free. So they're doing a GET request or something. That initial request coming into the VPC is going to be free. Your web server is then going to go ahead and connect up to, let's say it's a database server, MySQL server. Now, if it's using a private IP address and it's in the same availability zone, then that data is going to be free. If, however, you're connecting in across another availability zone, you will be charged 1 cent per gig. And again, I'm just giving you an example cost. It depends on the region, depends on the different regions in the world. So the cost can vary, but let's just use an example here of say 1 cent per gig. So you're going to pay an amount of money for communication across private IP addresses from one availability zone to the other. And if you're going outside your availability zones, if you're using a public IP address, that's then going to traverse the internet. And for example, it's going to be twice as expensive than doing it through an internal IP address across your availability zones. And for the reasons for that is you're using the AWS backbone network when you're connecting from availability zone A to zone B using the private IP address. But if you're using the public IP address, you're coming out of the VPC, you're going across the internet and you're coming back in. So you're going to incur a larger cost doing it that way. And let's say we've got VPC B, which is in another region as well, and we need to communicate from VPC A in one region to VPC B in another region. Well, you are going to pay inter-region costs. So it is going to be more expensive than communicating from one availability zone to the other within a single region. It's essentially going to cost you more to do region to region intercommunications between your VPCs. So going into the exam, just remember that you should always use private IP addresses over public IP addresses where possible to save on costs. This is then going to utilize the AWS backbone network. If you want to cut all your network costs, then group your EC2 instances inside the same availability zone and use private IP addresses. This will be 100% cost-free, but bear in mind that you're going to have a whole bunch of single points of failure issues. So if your availability zone goes down, you are going to lose your entire application. So those are the two things to remember going into the exam. Remember, if you do see a scenario-based question where it's talking about cost optimization, you always want to use private IPs over public IPs. And if you want to cut all your network costs, then just put everything inside the same availability zone. So that is it for this lecture. Congratulations, you've done really, really well. In the next lecture, we're just going to summarize everything we've learned in VPCs, and then we're ready to move on. So if you've got the time, please join me in the next lecture. Thank you.